coming from Roger, I didn't expect one at all. Didn't really want one, you know. But, yeah. Yeah, but somebody else would have had to get up. We're going to look in Nehemiah. We'll touch on chapters 1 through 4 in Nehemiah. I like Nehemiah. He's quite the man. And y'all have anything as we go along here, just feel free to speak up. This is not just for me up here to talk, but we'll just make it for anyone that might have some, you know, there's so much in here, but it's so many things in here that's so applicable to today and how we need to live and how we need to approach things. So if you have anything, just feel free to speak up. Just bust right in there. So first chapter of Nehemiah, we'll kind of try to touch chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4 a little bit. And so Nehemiah got him down. He was a rebuilder of broken walls and lives. Quite the man. And you know, we say, you know, always be ready. And I think spiritually, we find in here that Nehemiah always made himself spiritually available. Now, you know, we should always make ourselves available to God in what He wants us to do. But that doesn't mean that we should just sit around and wait for God's instructions. We're to be up and to be busy with our own job and be busy about God's work too. It's not just a one-sided thing. So we look here in the first few verses there of chapter 1 at Nehemiah. It says, the words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah, and it came to pass in the month Chislew in the 20th year, as I was in Shushan the palace, that Hananiah, one of my brethren, came, he and certain men of Judah, and I asked them concerning the Jews that had escaped, which were left of the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said unto me, the remnant that are left of the captivity there in the province are in great affliction and reproach. The wall of Jerusalem also is broken down, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. And it came to pass when I heard these words that I sat down and wept, and mourned certain days, and fasted, and prayed before the God of heaven. So here we see Nehemiah, he's concerned before he even hears the news about it, because he's asking, how are things going with the brethren over in Jerusalem? He's a concerned individual. He reminds me of someone that's probably always in a constant state of prayer. He's always close to God. His walk with God was probably always good. And you know, he had a very important job. He was a king's cupbearer. He was probably the next closest to the king as was the king's wife. And he was close to the king. He obviously did a very excellent job in his work because he took pride in his work, did the things that he was supposed to do and did it right. But he was always, his walk with God, I believe, was always first and foremost in his mind. Um, so here, Nehemiah, the man of God, he receives tragic news. That tragic news created what? It created a burden. Created a burden instantly in his heart because of his love for his people. So the first thing Nehemiah does, he hits his knees. He fasted and prayed. And according to the Bibles here in chapter 1:1, in the month that it mentions there, and chapter 2:1, he did this for about 3 or 4 months before he ever went to the king. And we all know the story, how he went to the king and requested that he be able to go to his homeland. But it looks like he fasted and prayed about 3 to 4 months ahead of time. And he had to be real careful with his presence in front of the king too, because the kings back in those times did not allow any sad faces in the court. You better be happy when you're around the king, or he's liable to have you impaled, liable to have you taken out. That's just the way it was back then. He didn't want any sad faces. He wanted to think that everybody was happy to see him, I think is what it was. That's the way the kings were, and they wanted people to at least appear happy in his presence. So he had to be careful around the king, which he was there every day. So finally, after 3 or 4 months, he presented his burden to the king, received permission to go with blessing. And that's just God at work. You know, because it could have went totally the other way. Back in Ezra, you'll see where they left and went to do this same work. And while they were prosperous for a while, later on, apparently it got shut down and reversed because he got news that the walls had been torn down and burnt. And he thought they were doing a lot better off than this. So Nehemiah's response to the king's response was arise and build. So Nehemiah then, after the burden, after the prayer and fasting, then he went into physical action. First he went into spiritual action. Now he's going into a physical action, and he's devising a plan at all the while and praying about his plan, getting things together. He's not just throwing this all together at once and trying to run off and do something about it. He's making a plan. He's having God lead him, and it's not just bang, 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 fast and furious. He received letters from the king. There we read that in chapter 2, in 9 through 15, he says, Then I came to the governors beyond the river, and he had his letters on him, and gave them the king's letters. And now the king had sent captains of the army and the horsemen with me. And he put things into action. But when, in verse 10 there, it says, When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the servant, the Ammonite, heard of it, it grieved them exceedingly that there was come a man to seek the welfare of the children of Israel. So you see, when we go to do something for God, we're always going to face opposition of some kind. It might be mild and it might be great, but almost immediately when he starts getting things together, getting this plan going, in action, putting things into action, there's a pushback. And that's what happens many, many times. When we go to do God's work, there's going to be opposition. And if you never have opposition, then we need to look at what we're doing and how we're doing it. Because we're always going to have that opposition if we're doing right by God. Nehemiah got there, and things didn't look too good, did they? In verse 2:12 it says, I arose in the night, I and some few men with me, and neither told I any man what my God had put in my heart to do at Jerusalem. Neither was there any beast with me, save the beast that I rode upon. And I went out by night by the gate of the valley, even before the dragon well and the dung port, and viewed the walls from Jerusalem, which were broken down, and the gates thereof were consumed with fire. So Nehemiah looked over, and he's still thinking. He's using his knowledge and wisdom from God to get this done. A lot of times, I know I do, when I'm going to go off to try to right the ship, I do it on my thinking instead of God's thinking. I don't let God lead. I'll rush off and try to fix it myself before I ask God to intervene and try to do it like God wants it done. So he went out, he surveyed the walls at night privately. Just had a few men with him. Then he presented a plan to the people. Through prayer and supplication, God had given him a plan. I think that's in 2:17. He says, chapter 2, verse 17, Then said I unto them, Ye see the distress that we are in, how Jerusalem lieth waste, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. Come and let us build up the wall of Jerusalem, that we be no more a reproach. Then I told them of the hand of my God, which is good upon me, as also the king's words that he had spoken unto me. And they said, Let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for this good work. And isn't that wonderful, the response that Nehemiah got? Let us rise up and build. Let's go. Don't we a lot of times when somebody wants to do something, we say, that's going to be too hard. Just can't do it, Jess. At one time we could do that, but we just can't do it now, And we get negative really quick sometimes. But when God's helping us, when God's leading us, all things are possible, are they not? All things are possible. Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem thought the people were weak and foolish. And they told them more than once, what are y'all even doing? You're never going to get this done. Don't even try. And then eventually they told them, or they conspired to kill them while they were working, or even come in at night. And then once again, with the knowledge and wisdom that Nehemiah had, he improvised a plan against that too, to keep his workers safe. And it worked. And there were certain places in the walls while they were building that was more vulnerable than other places. And that's where Nehemiah put men with arms, because that's where the enemy's going to attack you, is where you're most vulnerable. And where we're most vulnerable in our lives, in our spiritual life, is where Satan attacks us. If we've got something that tempts us and we're quick to give in, that's where we're most vulnerable. That's where our wall is the lowest, and that's what we've got to guard against the most in our spiritual life. This teaches us how to deal properly when we get a burden. Hit our knees in prayer. And we don't just pray one time and then expect God to do all the rest. We need to do like Nehemiah. Pray and pray and pray. Pray often. When it's not working and it's not coming out right, pray some more. God will give us the answers eventually. Nehemiah went to work first on his knees to the King of Kings, and then he went to the Persian king. He used wisdom, and we talk about him making a plan according to knowledge and wisdom. Wisdom is knowledge correctly applied, and he used his knowledge of God's wisdom to do the work that he was supposed to be doing. And then when we go to do that work, remember there's always opposition. We're always going to be faced with something. Sometimes it's close friends, sometimes it's strangers that will oppose us. Over in, we're almost done here. 1 Corinthians 1:18 through 20. First Corinthians 1:18. This should give us hope in today's world. For the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness. That's what the opposing people thought Nehemiah and his brethren, they thought them foolish. But unto us which are saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and I will bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent. Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the disputer of this world? Hath not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? And in 28 it says, and base things of the world and things which are despised hath God chosen, yea, and things which are not, to bring to naught things that are, that no flesh should glory in his presence. And what I want you to see also is 1 Corinthians 2:1 through 5. 1 Corinthians 2:1 through 5. And I, brethren, when I came to you, came not with excellency of speech or wisdom, declaring unto you the testimony of God. For I determined not to know anything among you, save Jesus Christ and him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. That's what we face many times when we face opposition. We go at it in weakness, fear, and trembling. But with the King of Kings, all things are possible. And my speech and my preaching was not with enticing words of man's wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, that your faith should not stand in the wisdom of men, but in the wisdom of God, the power of God. So if Nehemiah, if he had listened to the men that were opposing him, he'd have never gotten done what God wanted him to do. Things can sure drag us down in a hurry. But God has always got a plan. God is always right. If we'll follow God, we're going to be okay to the best of our ability. That's all I have this evening. Any comments on the lesson tonight?